Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about when you start to feel old in midlife. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 1 million downloads and counting. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife clarity expert, and I am so glad to be here with you again. So today we're talking about something that happens to so many of us. It's that first moment when you start to feel old or when you start to feel older. Now, there may be several of those moments, but I find the first moment the first time it happens, particularly interesting. I can't wait to hear your stories too, so please send them to me. I'm sure this episode is going to trigger a lot of memories, so send them to me in email at info@susierosenstein.com. I can't wait to hear them. But just quick, I want to make sure you know about a really useful free download I have for you called Top 10 Tips to Reimagine Your Life After 50. Like I said, it is free and it's super helpful when you're looking for some journal prompts to start thinking about who you are, what you want, and what's really possible for you now that you're older and wiser. You're an older and wiser woman in the middle. Head over to www.susierosenstein.com/10 questions. Okay, now here we go. Today's episode is all about when you start to feel old or older or less youthful, however it comes up for you. It is funny because as I started to dig into this topic in my mind, I couldn't help but also remember those times when I wanted to be older and look older. I remember that. It's quite the opposite for so many of us now. I think it started in high school for me. Maybe junior high and for sure high school. I kind of had a Marsha Brady look happening back then. Lots of people mentioned that to me. It's, "Oh, Susie, you look like Marsha," which was very relevant back then because we were all watching the Brady Bunch. And that observation couldn't have made me happier. I thought she was the grooviest girl on the planet. Actually, I still do think she's pretty groovy and would love to have her on this podcast. So you are cordially invited to help me manifest this guest for you. Now, I digress a little bit, but seriously, there was a time when I wanted to look older. For me, it wasn't about being the legal age to drink, but it was definitely a social thing. I wanted to look cool, and I thought that looking a bit older was cool. Can you relate to that? But then there was a definite shift, and I think it had something to do with pushing 30. I wasn't married, and I definitely wanted to meet someone and have a relationship that led to marriage. Most of my friends were married or engaged by then. I'd been to many, many weddings. So that birthday was an interesting one. While I didn't feel old, I felt something different. I felt older. I felt like I had to take things more seriously and stop waiting for this kind of a relationship to just materialize. I needed to do something different. I had to take focused action. I remember reading a book and being introduced to the idea of what was negotiable and non-negotiable, and this simple concept was powerful. And I remember making a list that made things more clear for me in terms of dating and what questions to ask and what questions to get answers to. I don't remember everything on the list, but one thing had to do with work. I wanted somebody who had interests other than their career. Somebody who didn't just work, who also knew how to, have a passion or have interests and do interesting things. That meant a lot to me. But the real breakthrough was making a list like this. Some things were non-negotiable, the must-haves, and others were more open or negotiable. So in this case, recognizing my thoughts and feelings around feeling older were quite useful because I met and married my husband within 2 years after that epiphany by an old-fashioned personal ad before online dating in the newspaper, where you responded by letter and mailed it to a P.O. box. Those were the days. Yes, I placed that ad in 1993, and by the way, so did he, and married in 1994. And yes, I hear you. I will do an episode about this someday. I mean, I would love to dig up the ad. I think that would be pretty fun. So anyway, this moment stands out very clearly in my past when I realized I was older and feeling it. As you know, on this podcast, we talk a lot about raising your awareness about what you're thinking because it directly affects the way you're feeling. I must have been thinking something like, wow, 30 is getting up there. I better take this more seriously. And that thinking made me feel action-oriented. Not quite urgent, but a little bit urgent. Maybe like a small U urgent. But for sure, highly motivated to focus on the task at hand. But now let's talk about the first time I felt midlife older, like the kind of wake-up call where you start identifying with the Golden Girls or whoever you think of when you think of old. For me, it was another needlepoint epiphany. Now, if you're a regular listener of the podcast, you may recall that in episode 139, 5 Ways to Use Envy for Good in Midlife, I described another incredibly pivotal moment in my life that involved needlepoint. This one was around my new awareness that I had envy for the owner of the needlepoint store because she figured out how to follow her passion of needlepoint and how to create a business out of that passion. At the time, I was working in the field of health education and publishing, and I never imagined I would have ever been there as long as I had been there. Even though I had entrepreneurial side gigs for most of my life, I hadn't jumped into being an entrepreneur yet full time. And I was disappointed by that. I was also scared about doing it, but I was disappointed that it hadn't happened yet. My personal reaction taught me so much about what I really wanted. Actually, this whole experience made such an impact on me, and it's something I teach in a much greater detail in the Women in the Middle Academy. It is so powerful. Anyway, this was all in my 40s, and I ended up being laid off the year I turned 50. And that's when I trained to be a certified life coach, and I launched my business in the following years. I didn't realize until just now, as I was preparing this episode, that I actually had 2 huge needlepoint epiphanies in my life. Who would have figured that that would have ever happened? So the second big needlepoint observation was about feeling old. And boy, did it catch me off guard. At that time, I was in my mid-40s, and needlepoint was new to me, so I was in a needlepoint store, and it was relatively new. Typically, the way needlepoint projects worked for me was that I would purchase the design and the threads, go home, start the project, and then have to go back to the store periodically when I needed more direction or guidance or help with a stitch or help fixing a problem, something like that. These projects typically took me about a year. I don't like to do this sort of thing under pressure, so I made sure I had enough time. I really loved going to the store, I have to say. It was so bright and artsy. The beautiful hand-painted canvases were all over the walls, and the colors of the threads, they were so vibrant, and they were across the back wall. So I was well into this first of 3 projects for my kids, and I knew I needed some help. I had a huge area of a solid dark color, dark navy blue, to needlepoint. And I wasn't loving it. I was having this lovely conversation with the owner of the store, and she told me about the clip-on light, which was fantastic. You clip it onto the canvas frame you're working from, and it's life-changing. Extra light, so good. But wait, there's more. I was describing how dark this color was, and it was so hard to see. I was going on and on about it, because not all designs have dark colors, and not all designs have like a big patch of the same color. And she looks at me and she says, I think you may need reading glasses. Now, I was stunned. I never wore glasses in my life. I couldn't believe that the needlepoint lady was diagnosing my problem. No problem, she says, as she walks me over to the cash register and shows me a nice, pretty display of reading glasses. Give these a try, she says, as she pulls out a pair for me to try on. Well, I felt old. I was taken aback. Now, this is before I was a coach or knew anything about mindfulness. I hadn't given much thought to midlife or aging either. I didn't consider myself midlife. I just didn't. I didn't have any sign of perimenopause, no gray hair, no colonoscopy screening. Nothing I might have considered was related to getting older. None of that stuff was happening just yet. To my knowledge, anyway. Looks like something was happening with my eyeballs. Who knew I had all these weird thoughts about reading glasses? Or that a woman owner at a needlepoint store would have been the one who pointed all of this out to me. I just couldn't believe it. So anyway, I purchased, and then I saw what I was working on so much better, like it was a miracle. And that was the beginning of purchasing dozens and dozens of reading glasses, wearing them on my head, leaving them all over the house, so I always had them, Buying 3-packs at Costco, usually they have those 3-packs. They're awesome. I bet you might be wearing a pair of those right now, and so on. Reading glasses were my entree to aging. Oh, you know what? Maybe I should make like a Pinterest pin about that. Reading glasses were my entree to aging. Anyway, something like that. I definitely had a thought, though, that reading glasses make you look old, especially when you wear them far down on your nose and look over the top of them to speak to people. It took me a bit of time, but clearly I embraced them. And now, of course, other things like this soon followed. The colonoscopy clinic phone call on my 50th birthday, my membership to AARP, my chin whiskers and facial hair, and don't forget the sagging eyelids, or what I learned over the last few years, what they're called is hooded eyes. Who knew that? And then there's the random aches and pains, and my extreme enjoyment of eating an early dinner. You gotta love that. But one thing that really needed thought work to get my head around was my CPAP machine for sleeping. Now, you may have heard me mention this before with those 2 recent episodes about the importance of sleep in midlife, but wow, the CPAP was a little different for me because all of a sudden I had an aging thing in common with older men. So I wasn't just associating with the midlife gals, now I was associating with the older men. I have no idea what the stats are about those of us who need CPAP, but the funniest thing I do now that I'm more comfortable with the situation is to spot other CPAP wearers at the airport. You see, it's a medical device, so you have to carry it. You don't pack it. And they get packed in a recognizable little case, a little carry case. I haven't yet struck up a conversation with another CPAP-wearing guy, but I see them and I give them a secret nod in my mind. I'm not flirting with them. A secret little nod of acknowledgement that they have also prioritized their health over vanity because being compliant and wearing this bizarre-looking contraption isn't for the faint of heart. It really isn't. But looking after your health like this is so important, especially at our age. When it comes to your health and actually aging gracefully, there are so many things we don't have control over. Why not control what we can, right? That's how I feel about CPAP. Now, there have been a few other situations that have stood out for me over the years, so I want to share those too, all in the spirit of just poking you a little bit and getting you to think about your own life and where this kind of stuff comes up for you. Now, there's the first time I was asked if I wanted a senior discount. I spoke about this in episode 243, and I titled it Mind Drama and Senior Discounts in Midlife. And the answer was yes, I do want a senior discount. I was buying perfume. That's not the cheapest thing in the store. I was at like a drugstore, and I think it was about $80. So yeah, I saved a few dollars. But it was the first time. And I quickly asked, what age do you qualify for the senior discount? Was it 50, 55, 60, 65? I had no clue. So I didn't know what the person was thinking. Why did she offer it to me? As it turned out, indeed, I did qualify, and the discount helped soften the blow. And then there's a situation when you start hearing comments that you don't look your age or that you look good for your age. What the heck does that even mean? And what does it mean to you? Well, it usually means that you look younger than you are. And like most of us, you probably take that as a compliment. But when you think about it, what it really means is that you look younger than your age. And it's better to look younger than to look your age. Better because of our youth-oriented culture. And it's so easy to buy into that. I usually feel like a puffed up peacock when I hear a compliment like that. But now that I'm aware of my thoughts, I'm getting better at being more clear about what I want it to mean to me. So I create a pause. If I get a compliment like that, I'm thoughtful about it. What do I want it to mean to me? And what I want it to mean is that I look great, period. Not that I look great for my age. I look great. Can you relate to this? It also gives me pause when I may have thought something like that or even said it, right? Thinking it's a compliment, but really what does it mean? So there you have it. Several examples to get you thinking about what you think about aging, your age, feeling older, and feeling old. When you think about it, feeling old is a thought, at least the way we tend to talk about it, even though we say feeling old. And as we've been talking about it just now, there's also a slight difference between feeling old and feeling older. That may be meaningful to you or not. It depends on how you define aging for yourself. It's so interesting that it's so common to say that we feel old. Think about that. But really, this kind of thing is coming from your brain. It's a thought. And the way you think about being old, feeling old, makes you actually feel something that means old to you. So what does it mean to you? Does it mean tired? Does it mean experienced? Does it mean wise? Does it mean decrepit? Only you can understand what it is for you. So we have thoughts about aging, and feelings come from our thoughts about aging, which are not to be confused with aging-related sensations that you get from age-related ailments. So let's talk about that for a second. For example, one that I've experienced is some knee pain. This seems to be random and is not from an injury. So my guess is that it's deterioration of some sort. Now, I'm not a medical professional, but it's quite different from my personal back pain. My back pain started way back when I was 19 and had an unfortunate toboggan landing. Yes, a toboggan incident where I fractured 2 ribs and bruised my tailbone. But boy, was it fun until it wasn't. I've had back pain off and on since then. So for 40 years or so, really. And that kind of pain started when I was young and has probably been affected by aging. But in my mind, it's not quite the same thing as plain old deterioration or falling apart. And I just think of it differently. Any which way, it's another opportunity for you to be more intentional with the way you want to think about aging gracefully, and your aging body on purpose, right? So sometimes your thoughts serve you, sometimes they don't. Sometimes your thoughts are helpful for you to attain your goals, and sometimes they aren't. So being more aware and mindful this way helps you reduce autopilot thinking and create your life on your terms. And that is a very good thing at your age and any age. If you need help with thinking more intentionally about aging, making a midlife transition, a tweak, an adjustment, or change, anything like that, yourself, and want to understand how mindfulness can help you get out of your own way so that you're happier overall, I'm your gal. It is way more fun to do this together. So I hope that you got a lot out of this little chat about when you start to feel old and what's going on with you, and you can really apply it to your life and just learn more about what's going on up there in your brain. Now that is it for this episode. As you know, this podcast is all about how to love your life again after 50. It's really all about coaching you to be more intentional and to incorporate mindfulness into your life as a regular practice. This is how you put yourself on your agenda. My focus as your midlife coach is to help you get unstuck, clear, and focused on your current values and priorities so you don't have regrets. I can help you create the confidence, courage, and meaning you're looking for. If you're ready to take a baby step, you're invited to book your momentum call at www.womeninthemiddleacademy.com, and we will chat. One more thing, you're also invited to purchase my new masterclass, Get Unstuck, Midlife Clarity Fast and Easy, where you can get clear about your next chapter priorities without spin, confusion, and overwhelm in less than an hour. Head over to www.midliferoadmap.com. And finally, for show notes and links, head over to www.susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab and look for episode 374. You'll also see links there for the new show, Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for listening. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I will talk to you next week.